Put the microphone on. Hi and welcome back to the Spirit Lounge. I hope you guys are doing well. It's a bit loud there, but turn it down. Welcome to the continuation of our venture through the spiritual journey, your own journey towards grace, as you would see it, to the Father, to the All of the All. Remember, there is only one divine source, and it is called the All, the Divine Father of all. There are many false deities, there are many pretenders to that throne out there, and many faiths, but there is only one All, and you'll reach that within yourself. And that's what this channel is all about, to help you provide guidance and direction through scripture, through theosophy, from all around the world, and taking elements of that and the interpretations that I wish to provide from my own perceptions to you along your journey. So today we are going to move forward into Japanese Shinto. This is a slightly, it was an interesting endeavor, reading up about Shinto. There is no actual religious text on Shinto. There is a historical text of Japanese history which documents the creation of Shinto, but it doesn't actually have a religious book, as in the Bible, or the Torah, or any other, or the Bhagavad Gita in Hinduism, and so on and so forth. It doesn't really have a religious text, so it's difficult to. It's very conceptual, difficult to quantify, difficult to get your head around and your hands around it, in terms of a faith as we traditionally would think of one. But although the claim, so I'm going through a specific author. If I bring up the presentation now, we are going to go through a specific author on this particular book, and the author is Motohisa Yamakage, and he's a what you may call a master within the Shinto faith, and a teacher, a scholar, a practitioner of the spiritual faith, and he has practiced this faith for some time, and he also teaches it. Now, he does claim that there doesn't have a central source, a central all, a definition of grace or God within this faith. However, that is not true. From my reading, they just call it something different. The Shinto calls it something different. It's named Kami, the all source, the single source of all things, the Kami. They're called Kami, the spirits. But it does define a divine all, but in a very different way, in a way that it's claimed that it doesn't have one, but actually it does. And we're going to venture into that as we go through the Shinto together. Okay, so the Shinto itself is a religion native to Japan. It's centuries old, and it was tied to various influences in its religion. Mainly began referring to Shinto as a distinct religion at a prehistoric time, around 6 Common Era, which is BC. The ancient history of Koshinto, or as it's pronounced Ko-Shintō, is a mystic religion of the Jōmon period of Japan. And the traces of Koshinto began with the restoration of Shinto in the Edo period. So this goes back beyond, where it's had various transformations. Shinto has been subject to various transformations over its time. And the Edo period was to remove foreign ideas, mainly Buddhism, from what was called the pollution, from the purity of what Shinto came from. Shinto came from nature. It was the recognition of nature within all things, the connection of natural forces, that spirits existed throughout the natural world in various levels and dimensional levels, frequency levels, and these are called Kami. And this whole Shinto religion is based upon Kami and traditionals and spiritual practices, sacrifices, offerings, and so forth within the faith. But it does have a structure which is similar to moving up towards the frequency, moving up towards divine elevation, towards a central source. It does have this, although the author, Matsuhisa-san, doesn't actually state categorically that it does. So let's move into some more history about what Shinto is. So Shinto is undeniably a religion, and these are the words taken from the book, not my words. These are taken from the book and the author's comments. So Shinto is undeniably a religion unique to Japanese people. It's nurtured in the Japanese islands, and unlike Buddhism, Christianity, which are world religions that have come to Japan from foreign countries, influences on Shinto from Buddhism, Confucianism, or Chinese culture is often said that Shinto has no identity. Well, it does have an identity, but it's a very Japanese, very, very purely Japanese, homogeneous identity. It's simply a combination of influence from outside countries. Others say that Shinto is just old Japanese manners and customs, but it's actually more than that. It's more than that, much more than that. Koshinto, the original form of Shinto, it's ancient spirit which has remained unchanged by either historical or political manipulation. So there is no movement between politics and, it seems, Shinto faith within Japan, which is, or maybe it's in the background, but it doesn't seem to influence politics, which is good, because religion and politics should not be together, in my personal view. Its spirit has remained unchanged in historical or political manipulation. A religion typically has a founder, a doctrine, this is what we mentioned before, precepts or commandments, and objects of worship, such as symbols or idols. Shinto has none of these. I would beg to differ here. It doesn't have a founder. It seems to have been organically nurtured and cultivated into what is called Shinto today. For many places, islands and mainland of Japan, comes from nature. It does have a doctrine in terms of its practices and belief systems. So those are a doctrine, whether the author wants to identify them as such or not. They do have an identity and a form of doctrine. It does have precepts and commandments in terms of behaviour. So it does have commandments and precepts or patterns of behaviour within the Shinto faith. Objects, well, not necessarily, but it does have objects that have representations in the temples, in the shrines. And it does have kami. Kami are worshipped. So these are objects of worship, and it does have symbols. But not so much physical idols, but kami are worshipped. So in these things, it's not necessarily true, depends on your interpretation. And in my interpretation, all of these can be pinned down. It's a religion without a founder. Some Shinto sects, such as Watarei Shinto, and Yoshida Shinto, were actually created and founded by certain people. So they are derivatives of the original. But this does not mean these people were founders of Shinto. Shinto is a religion that has evolved out of the life and experience of Japanese people who have lived on these islands over the centuries. The same is true of folk. Hinduism in India, Taoism in China, are the first premises of Shinto. That teaching does not come from human beings, which is true. Teaching does not come from human beings. It's come from source itself, cascading gnosis through an individual, cascading it out into the world. Shinto is therefore defined as a religion revering great nature, as we mentioned before, profound perception of law of nature and mysteries held within the natural world. This is the essence of Shinto, and so we could say that Shinto's true founder is nature itself, as we've mentioned. Okay. Shinto's perspective is that mystical experiences, revelations given to someone, or man-made philosophies are often fallible, which they are, precisely because they come from human beings. Shinto has no doctrines. Well, it's a grey area. Shinto is also without any systematic doctrine connected to a founder's teachings. True, it's not like Buddhism, or the Buddha's teachings, it doesn't have that. It doesn't have dogmas, absolute code, orders, or laws applying to Shinto as a whole. This is partially true. I would agree with this for the most part. The Kojiki, the Ancient Chronicles of Japan of 712, and the Rihon Shoki Chronicles of Japan of 720, which have many Shinto themes, are not sacred texts akin to the Bible or the Quran. Yeah, these are more historical texts of the history of Japan, which do have mentions of the Shinto practices in them, but it's not a religious text. I agree with that. We have read and interpreted them with full attention and care, because every word is not necessarily considered as sacred. Shinto contains the ideas of purification, kiyome, and cleansing, harai. So purification is kiyome, cleansing is harai, harahi. These are not based on fixed doctrines. None of the sayings of Shinto thinkers, such as revere kami and respect ancestors, can be interpreted as doctrines. Like I say, it's cultural practices, cultural beliefs. So this can be a loose doctrine. The late Dr. Gene Hubbard, who taught at the University of Geneva, studied Shinto. He said the following: I met over 1,000 Shinto priests and Shintoists, and I have never heard the same words from each of them. In Shinto, people don't talk in the same pattern. They neither need nor are obliged to talk in the same fashion. Shinto, however, does not require such standardization of belief and practice. Japanese generally don't believe in words very much. It's wrong to consider human language as absolute, which is true. Human language differs in every culture and meaning, and each word has a different power. Human existence is very small and limited when compared with the great nature. I would agree with that, and also the Divine Father as well. Remember, human beings, the human species, the form itself is a single speck of dust in an infinite canvas of manifestation. It's really insignificant. Although we give it absolute significance and importance because we're within it, because we don't see. The way to see the divine is to see humanity from outside of humanity, from outside of the world, as the Father would see it. In Shinto, it is important for each person to experience and feel in his or her own way, and not to use language to force others to believe in a certain way. This is a very good practice and philosophy of Shinto. No religion should be forced down anyone, and no religion is the absolute. This is unfortunately not the case for those practitioners or evangelists or extremists within any faith, because they kill and slaughter constantly in the name of their faith, believing it to be the only one. And this statement here is very, very powerful in terms of Shintoism. No explanation is absolute, but putting the different explanations together brings out the essence of Shinto philosophy. Koshinto, which means the original Shinto, so the original Shinto was Koshinto. Of ancient times, Koshinto promotes the independent spiritual mental training of each person. The institutionalized shrine exists for ritual services and prayers that reflect the rhythms of everyday life. It responds to immediate and practical concerns. Koshinto allows the seeker to reach beneath the ritualized surface. Koshinto or Yamakaji Koshinto, or Koshinto or Yamakaji Shinto, has been handed down through many generations. Yamakaji Shinto contains within it the knowledge of ceremony, manners, rituals, methods of divination, traditional medicine, among an array of other things. Shinto is the consciousness underlying the Japanese mentality, culture, and values. Caring for the spirit of nature by Shinto's principal duty of human beings to care for and preserve their environment. To live within nature rather than attempting to dominate or destroy it, which is very much a failing of a Western failing. And the bracket commentary is my own. This is true. I've said it many times over the videos that we've done over the series of journeys into different aspects of faith, religion, doctrine, that the East doesn't look to dominate the powers of this universe, the powers and the forces that govern this earth, humanity. East looks to a more philosophical and a transcendence from form rather than the domination of it. Western culture, and I'm not talking about religion here, Western culture has lost itself in the need to dominate everything that surrounds itself. Dominate forces, dominate powers, dominate individuals, oppress, suppress. It's looking to dominate and control. One world government is coming out of this sense of thinking. This is what causes itself, this is what causes others and those who pursue this to go into the dark elements and practices of the forces of this world. This is where Satanism, Luciferianism, and all the perversion and distortion comes in. And this is the failing of the West, very much the failing and the fall of the West in terms of culture, in terms of its loss of its true understanding of the divine itself. Shintoism touches on this. It does have a divine center, regardless of what the author says here, and I will prove it by the interpretation as we move through this. But the East is always looking to, particularly Hinduism, Buddhism, is looking to transcend itself away from form, away from humanity, away from the human vessel, transcend away. Whereas the West looks to control and remain within the vessel. Its evangelism keeps it here of subservience. It doesn't seek to transcend as much as it should. But the culture outside of faith itself is always looking to dominate, always looking to master the material world. It drops into materialism and it loses itself in there. And this is a very big difference between the East and the West in terms of culture. And the faith and the way they practice in the East and West, for some, absorb that loss into the practice and also therefore into perception. And this channel, we don't take that view. This is very, my channel is looking to help you on your journey and in a very independent way, but I will give you my interpretations on everything that we go through and we'll follow this journey together. In Shinto, heaven, earth and humanity are different manifestation of one life energy. Absolutely. Could not agree more with that statement. For more than 3,000 years, the Japanese have believed that kami are spirits, spiritual energies and powers representing different levels of nature, but also different levels of the transcendental nature of spirit to the one. This is where it does have a divine one, although it doesn't discuss or describe it in traditional religious doctrines do. For more than 3,000 years, the Japanese have to believe that kami, the powers of the spiritual dimension, can make contact with human beings through trees. Now, this is where the natural concept comes in. This is where it's difficult to grasp, but sometimes it's conceptual. We find sacred trees within the precincts of certain Shinto tribes. So Shinto shrines either have around the sacred tree, have a sacred tree around them. At the core of the Shinto tradition is the practice of immersing the body in water, which is cleansing. Again, this is the same as being blessed in the church, for example. This is using water to bless, to cleanse in the river. Whilst this ritual is one of the physical cleansing, the purification of the body, it also represents the purification of the mind and the spirit. We can also argue that religion does not exist solely or primarily at the level of language. While rituals and festivals are a great lifeline in Shinto, more than mere manners and customs, teachings and views about life embedded in each of these rituals, gestures and actions, participants feel these can have mystical experiences through their practices. This is the same in all faiths. They practice rituals and festivals and offerings because they because it's believed that spiritual experiences or spiritual evolution can be had through these. I'm not going to dismiss that, but real spiritual expansion is done within the self. It's done within your prayer, it's done within your meditation, it's done within your practice, action, words, thoughts and intentions in this world. Just doing rituals and festivals and attending a place of worship once or twice a week and just doing that and ticking the box doesn't mean that you're spiritual ascending. Where are we here? Participants feel that these can have mystical experiences through their practices. The mental attitude. Priests who are deeply committed to the devout life can move many people's hearts. In Shinto, the spiritual tradition is allowed to evolve freely, since there is no definitive pattern or model. Because of this, some Shinto ideas can certainly go off track and bring out diverse levels of the tradition. So when it's free thought, it doesn't have a doctrine as such to follow. The interpretations can be many. And what the author here is describing, there can be many derivative versions of Shinto, which there seem to be as we go through this. We do not criticize or eliminate them. Low-level or wrong ideas will eventually be naturally eliminated in the long run. I do agree with this. In any faith, in any religion, in all the stepping stones across the river, you'll continue to pass through many. One, evolution of the self removes the distortion of illusion. It will remove confusion. It will move you towards more clarity. Everything moves to more clarity. Clarity is only there, there is only one channel. We'll approach that channel from many tributaries and vessels and sub-channels, coming into that single stream, going in towards the ocean of manifestation in the Divine Father itself. This is where clarity will come. So you can start anywhere, but if you once one continues and perseveres on the journey, this what we call low level or wrong ideas are eliminated because clarity emerges, gnosis emerges, which is then refines understanding and moves that stream closer to the single channel. Shinto has no precepts or commandments. There is no doctrine espoused in Shinto. There are two kinds of precepts, one for members of the religious order, governing the lives of monks and nuns, and the other for laymen and women. There are also precepts such as the preparation of meals, specific situations of times such as festivals or periods of fasting. Monotheistic religions contain a strong concept of salvation by submission to the judgment of God. Well, only some faiths have this. Christianity is one. Viewing humanity as corrupted by original sin. Original sin, as we've described many, is the fall of man. What is the fall of man? Well, the fall of man is materialism. The fall of man is the dropping into their ego. The fall of man is dropping into greed, into narcissism, self-righteousness and self-virtue, into adorning the image in the mirror. It is falling into humanness, falling into the realm of the world. This is the original sin. That has always been the sin. The sin has been the forgetting of grace and losing it, losing its true nature, losing its true origin, losing its true understanding is the original sin. It isn't eating of the apple or the serpent, but the serpent has a meaning also. But that is what it ultimately is, for me. And having to seek salvation through divine grace. Well, salvation is the revelation within self of the true passage towards the Father. The Gnosis, the all, the Father, the Divine Father, the God of the all of the all. And the escape from human constraints in Shinto, we do not have precepts that perform this function. Well, they kind of do, but it's described differently in a loose term. Provide advice, admonition, cited above to revere kami and respect ancestors, does not prescribe people's behavior in detail. No, it doesn't prescribe it in detail. That's true, but it does give a path towards what we would call salvation, revelation, towards the single one. the source. In here it's called the source kami, but we call it the Divine Father, the Godhead, the All itself, the source of all things. There are also taboos in Shinto, as there are in all faiths. While uncleanliness, pollution by death and funerals, and white uncleanliness, which is pollution by death and funerals, and red uncleanliness, which is pollution by blood and menstruation. Some taboos for priests and those conducting rituals, limited only to special occasions of ritual services for kami. They are not connected with ordinary life. Shinto teaches neither salvation nor sin. This is true. But it does, salvation, as I mentioned, is the revelation of the divine. So it does teach salvation because Shinto does talk about moving to the divine kami. So this is not necessarily true either. Shinto, by contrast, does not possess a clear definition of sin. No, it does not. Nor is there the karmic principle of cause and effect. Well, it does mention it, but cause and effect is there whether Shinto describes it or not. Which is a characteristic of Buddhism. Yes, it's a strong principle of Buddhism, as we've talked about in the previous series. And Hindu Dharma. Yes, that's also true. In which our present circumstances can be determined by our actions in previous lives. Not necessarily true. The previous lives. So here, he's talking about previous lives. So Shinto does have reincarnation. Previous lives are not determined by karma. It is determined by the decision of the soul entering life to provide a life for us to... We come into life by our own volition. We come into form by our own volition. It's not imposed on us. But that life has to serve a purpose, a spiritual divine purpose. And what is that? Of gnosis, unveiling of self to self, the true self to self. And this will also to balance our energy. Karma is really just the balancing out of distorted force that we've created from actions, words, thoughts and intentions in this realm of the universe. To return back to the purity of grace, we also have to divine and rectify the distortion forces that we created in our own channel. This is karma. But it's not the reason for manifestation. It's not the reason for reincarnation. It's not the force that reincarnates. But it's one of the principal outcomes that we are here to balance those distorted forces into a single stream of more purity. But this goes way beyond the body of humanness. Humanness is just one facet. It's the lowest form. We don't need to become perfect to release ourselves from the cycle of rebirth into physical form of humanity. Our journey goes on for infiniteness to purify the stream. To reflect the spiritual reflection of this into our souls. Our souls are the expression of life. It's what we've become. The soul is to re-represent the mirror image of the spirit is what the soul is seeking to become. This is the salvation, this is the revelation, this is the journey. The sin was its removal away. It was to move away from its distancing from the spirit. Okay, the spiritual goal is to move beyond the cycle of birth. Sorry, I missed something here. Hindu Dharma, in which our present circumstances can be determined by our actions in previous lives. The spiritual goal is to move beyond the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. This is true. Shinto is a religion without guilt, which assumes the essential goodness of humanity and each individual's potential for good. This is true. There is a potential for good, and there is innate goodness in all of us. This is our consciousness, this is our divine spirit calling us. But there are those who have rejected that and have chosen a different passage. Shinto does not have an awareness of good and evil that is at once simple and subtle. Shinto conceives of the good and evil in aesthetic terms. To the Japanese sensibility, the straight line is inherently beautiful. It need not be rigidly straight, but its emphasis should be forward and positive, signifying organic growth, clarity, honesty. This is what we're talking about the metaphor of the single line in Shintoism. It's a line towards the divine kami at the top. So it's the same principle as all of the faiths, really. And it's talking about keep the straight line. It may wave and meander around, but it's straight. It's moving towards a single channel from all the derivatives that exist. So this is talking about the same thing as what we've spoken about in other faiths. So it is there in Shintoism, although it's denied a little bit by the author here. Same principles apply to Japanese craftsmanship, tradition and modern. Yeah, Japanese design is very straight. It's very clean lines, fashion is clean, architecture is clean, furniture is clean lines. There's not a lot of elaborate architecture and design. It's very clean in traditional Japanese architecture and design. There is an emphasis on the clear, simple lines rather than unnecessary curves and complexities. Art, flower arrangement, the straight line, the simple pattern is social with nobility. The no right includes the entreaty, please make it straight. Misfortune is associated with all that is warped. So again, straight, slightly renowned, but when it's distorted, this is talking about warped spiritual distortion. The same principle can apply to everywhere. Curved or crooked include one's own mind. Absolutely, the heart and the soul and the spirit and the mind. The soul, the heart, the mind, the body. If it's distorted, it will meander in all channels of loss and distortion and delusion and illusion. This is what he's talking about, why the straight line is so important. It may have slight curves and meander, but it's still going straight. This is why he's talking about the warpedness of the non-straight line. It is attributed to Magasubi, the curved spirit that can be around us or within us. That curved spirit is the origin of our own evil deeds and any misfortunes or disasters. Evil deeds and thoughts arise from the operation of the curved spirit. This is talking about the curved spirit being, remember the center, the left and the right channel, right to grace, left to darkness, in the middle is the meandering channel where all manner of experiences come in. This is where the curved spirit exists in this definition. This is where evil can pervade if we don't manifest ourselves towards grace. The wind of the channel will move us towards the left, towards darkness, which is why it's referring here to the cursed spirit with the origin of our evil deeds and any misfortune and disasters. Evil deeds and thoughts arise from the operation of the curved spirit. Imbalance it creates leads us away from that which is straight and clear. Shinto divides evil deeds into two categories. Amatsusumi, the most pernicious crimes of all, and kunitsusumi, or more conventional misdemeanors. The sins belong to the former category. Amatsusumi are described in the Kojiki and the Nihanshoki as the raging victory of the Susanoo against his sister Amaterasu, and were actually offences destructive of agriculture. Distortion of the food line is seen as a heavenly sin, while the earthly sins of Kunitsusumi are seen as evil deeds committed by people who are possessed by spirits. Now this is possession in other words, but this is also, I would say in our world, these are, I would say, the Amatsusumi are those very, very distorted, dark, satanic, evil, paedophilic, distorted, inverted practices. Those who believe in the inversion of the cross, the inverted symbols of power, lust, desire, greed, suppression and oppression, one world, single governance, all this kind of stuff is what I call there the Amatsusumi. This also includes death and destruction and eternal perpetual war, all in the name of some distorted view or interpretation of a religious doctrine. I would also say the Kunutsusumi is that what we do to each other, murder. We do to each other suicide, ourselves suicide, murder, other sins that we would call not necessarily of goodness. to each other, personally, individual to individual. Straight in the Shinto, these concepts form the basis of moral judgment. Good or moral behavior is associated with balance of mind, body, and spirit. Evil or immoral behavior with imbalance, be it spiritual, intellectual, or physical. In Shinto, ethics and aesthetics are closely entwined. Shinto has no idols. In Shinto, during a certain period in the medieval age, when it was most strongly interacting with Buddhism, images of kami were made, mostly at the level of folk religion. So they had images of kami or idols, but kami was really held as a concept and something within the mind and within the soul. It wasn't really embodied in a figure. Shinto does not have any lasting tradition of sculptured images or statues in human form. People make their ceremonies by facing the sanctuary of the shrine or the rock, which is called iwakara. This does not necessarily mean they are worshipping either the shrine or the rock itself. They are mere places where the worshipper finds spiritual inspiration. The mirror, which is kagami, they have a mirror in there also reflecting the spirit out. Now, obviously, this is we go to a church. We go to a church. Why? Because it represents a place of worship. It's not necessarily a shrine. We worship in the church or to a shrine, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're worshipping that specific thing. In some faith, it does, like the image of Christ, the Mother Mary, the cross, whatever it may be. But this is talking about the temple or a church or a cave, maybe a space of spiritual inspiration. How should we interpret the mirror, kagami, which is the innermost part of the sanctuary? So within a shrine there's a mirror at the back. The mirror is the precious treasure-like tools reflecting the image of kami out, spiritual reflection out. It is also the symbol of the sun, the source of all life, and the symbol of spiritual light, because it reflects. Bright, shining, radiant light body, reflecting the spirit of kami, but not representing kami in a material form. The hakuhe, white paper cut and folded in special sacred forms, which are also in the shrine, should also not be misinterpreted as an image or an idol. Hakuhe is used for exorcism and purification, and it can be found at the front of the shrine. Hakuhe has, apologies for the pronunciation for any Japanese who watch this. Haku-hai, maybe, was originally used for a very precious offering to kami, and was later considered as yorishori for kami's presence. It has become the ritual tool for purifying people. Okay, whereas the West, and to a large extent the Indic traditions, they seek a concrete image of God, indefiable with an individual physical body. This is true. A lot of faiths, particularly Hinduism, has created a myriad of gods, idols. And the reason for this, in Christianity, specific manifestations of elements of Christianity, as Yeshua, Jesus, the Mother Mary, the saints, the cross itself. In Hinduism, it has many deities, but it is a monotheistic faith. It believes in a single all, the absolute. It's called in the Upanishads, the Vedic spiritual text. But humanity, in the times of when these things were manifested, were unable, and humanity still is unable, to understand that the Father, the God, is formless. It's not animate, it's not inanimate, it's formless, it's not formless, it's not form, it's nothing, it's indescribable, it's untouchable, but it exists in thought. Pure, utter thought and presence that is felt within. Humanity is not able to understand this because it needs something to see with its senses, to touch with its hands. So we create derivatives of the absolute in many forms, and these are what these idols and demigods are. They are representations of the single one. Like it says, the distorted passages, wrong view, whatever you want to call it, that gnosis will be removed. People will move away from these idols and effigies as they move closer to gnosis of the single one, move closer to the single narrow channel where the God's light is in before you, these idols and everything else moves away. It disappears because you have moved spiritually beyond it. This is another reason for this channel, is to help you move towards this place. Okay, so these are individual. The Japanese are quite free from such constraints. They see no need to mold the divine in human form in order to recognize. Both form and body are seen as temporary and transient by the Japanese. It's temporary and transient in all faiths. Even the shrine did not exist in Shinto's original form. Yeah, they just used to just worship from within the self out into nature. Shinto has no organization. In early Shinto, not only was there no shrine building, but there was also no central organization. I don't think there still is. Each powerful shrine had an organization for its rituals. They each still acted as an independent entity. In the medieval age, Yoshida Shinto appeared in Shinto history and established a license system to counter Buddhism. So Buddhism was coming in some early periods of Shintoism, and Buddhism was creeping in from northern India as it spread throughout the east, and it started to have an influence. And actually, it started to be practiced more and more within Japan. And then there was the Edo period and the Meiji period, in which they wanted to reform the Reformation period, which they tried to remove and expel Buddhism. And it's not expel Buddhism, but remove Buddhism influences upon Shintoism. Yashiro Shinto appeared in Shinto history and established a license system to counter Buddhism. There was no organization. It was an unprecedented situation for Shinto to be faced with government control in the beginning of the Meiji era in 1868. Japan's defeat in World War II, so-called national state, the national of state Shinto was eliminated. After 1945, the voluntary United Shrines group, Jinja Honsho, remained. The tragedy was of not having any Shinto then has no founder, no doctrine, no commandments, no idols, no organization. What it does have are ambiguous characteristics like sympathy and silent experience. It's the silent experiences which is what the narrow channel takes you towards. Ultimately, the final stone on the river is your own silent experience. So there has a lot to teach us in Shintoism here within this personal nature of spirit. Why it has been often considered a non-religion by Japanese scholars. It's considered non-religion because when it's compared to other faiths throughout the world, it has no doctrine, has no book, has no founder, has no central place, has no central divine place. It's very difficult to conceptualize and get your head around or your arms around it. It's hard to define. It's very, very difficult to define Shintoism if we approach it in traditional religious terms. What it does, what it does have are ambiguous characteristics like sympathy and silent experience. Why it has been often considered a non-religion by Japanese scholars. Development of Shinto at the intuitive rather than the overtly intellectual level. It's another reason why it's one positive aspect there for us to teach us. Japan has remained a remarkably homogeneous nation, which it has. It's trying to change that now. This explains many of the characteristics of Shinto. In a homogeneous society, there is less competition between ideas or schools of thought. Uniformity turned out to be a significant weakness when Japan was brought face to face with other civilizations and ways of life. The Meiji era, during this time, great turmoil, Shinto was forced to mutate into a distorted, nationalized religion. This ethnocentrism was the result of this reaction to admiration of the West. Shinto, lacking its own solid doctrine and theory, ended up revealing this weakness. Defeat in World War II, Shinto went into decline. Japanese atheists and faithless Japanese, a peculiar form of society, was created in Japan after World War II. The birth of such a secular, materialistic and atheistic society. This is what happens, unfortunately, with the weakness of Shinto as described by the author here. because it had no doctrine, had no church, had no place, had no symbology, had no central thing to worship, had really nothing to hold on to, nothing physical or representation of it. It was very, very conceptual in terms of the spirit of nature. It was easily lost and easily diluted, and people moved away from it when they started to be exposed to more other faiths where these things could be defined, like Buddhism, Christianity, Confucianism, and so forth. It started to move away from them, and then Shintoism started to suffer. And then you have atheism, when people lose themselves into materialism, which is what they're talking about, which happened before World War II, but definitely after World War II, when Japanese society started to be much more influenced by the West. Japanese adopted only the materialistic and abstract parts of Western civilization. They equated atheism, or at least the absence of faith. The notion of kami and spirit soul, which is reikon, are increasingly disappearing. Human beings are seen as simply material beings, and there is no concept of an afterlife or sense of continuity in the dominant culture of modern Japan. And this I can testify to, because I do have experience with a lot of Japanese. And the young specifically now have lost all faith. They don't see the presence of spirit, very materialistic, which moves you. Materialism, the fall of man, the fall of the soul, the original soul is the removal, is the fall into materialism, which will always lead you into self-virtue, lead you into self-righteousness, your own ego, your mind, your intellect. You become the driving force. When you worship these things, you worship and you become detached from grace itself. You dismiss the divine. You miss the divine, then you worship self. When you worship self, you become atheistic. When you worship atheism, for me, is a distortion. You have no boundaries. Atheism will then allow the acceptance that everything is good, everything is acceptable, because you will mentally and intellectually justify it. You mentally and virtue signally goodness. Self-righteousness will justify all manner of things. In atheism is always the stream that is generally behind it. This is the fall and the sin. This is the original sin, if you want to use that. It's the fall of man. It's where humanity has got itself today. And within this channel is to help those who are seeking to move back to grace, to help you move back. When human beings become conscious of an afterlife, of a higher being or beings, of the possibility of rebirth, they are more likely to think beyond their immediate material interests. Absolutely. People might conclude that they can do anything as long as they are not violating man-made laws. Absolutely not. Managing to escape punishment in man-made, material, human laws. Goals are satisfying their short-term desires and prolongation of life. As I mentioned before, they want to dominate life, prolong life, seek more life, more manifestations, more incarnations, because physical life is their souls are attached to it. As the social and environmental costs of materialism become more apparent, people are inclined once again to ask deeper questions. Booming interest in mysticism known as the New Age, this is happening more and more now. People are starting to realize what this world truly is. They're seeing what was once unseen. They're unveiling to them which was once hidden. Everything is being pushed out because we're entering a new yoga, the Dwapara yoga from the Kali yoga. We're entering into a new period of life, the Aquarian age, if you like. There are many cycles around this, cycles and definitions of cycles. These are all cycles. Movement, new occult religions, climate of spiritual ignorance. Such movements can assume a distorted or perverse form. Evidence of spiritual crisis. Extremist political movements emerge. An indication of social malaise. The more abstract and intellectual they become, the more they become materialistic, absolutely, as we mentioned, and worldly, and so lose their spiritual dimension. When human beings develop their name and mysterious powers, such as miraculous healing gifts or spiritual natural abilities like clairvoyance, They need to display in their work a sensitivity towards human nature in all aspects, as well as an understanding of the balance between humanity and the natural world. This is the ethos that should govern psychic abilities if they are to have beneficial rather than harmful effects. The result of spiritual impetuosity is the collective hysteria associated with the occult. So what it's talking about here is you have, as you can see, everyone's a tarot card reader today. Everyone's a medium, everyone's a psychic, everyone's on YouTube claiming to be clairvoyant, claiming to see the future, making predictions left, right and centre, behind paywalls, what I call grifting spiritualists. Some are very good, but many, very, very few original. And this is impetuosity, spiritual impetuosity, imposturing, in other words, spiritualness. It's all New Age, occult beliefs, creating diversions, creating pathways to more distortion and delusion, moving you away, in other words, from the movement towards the Father. Instead, you worship the esoteric and the metaphysical. You get lost in this world, which you can lose yourself for lifetimes in this world. But it really won't get you anywhere other than satisfying the ego and persona that look how psychic I am. Look how clairvoyant I have achieved. Look at my mediumship. And there are many, mediums out there and psychics who will never admit. You can watch their channels and they do predictions and they claim they are independent in thought and in spiritual psychical expression. But in actual fact, underlying there is indoctrination within their West or East political biases. West is good, East is bad, and vice versa. Be careful of people who do this, because nothing is of this way. Right? Be careful. Be careful who you listen to, because ultimately the passage is yours. And that's what the author is saying in this passage, which is one of the most important ones I've read in this What is Shinto chapter. Characteristics of the Shinto. Shinto is often referred as polytheistic, a belief in or worship of more than one god. No, it's not. These are kami, spirits leading to one god. So it's not really polytheistic. I believe it's monotheistic, actually, in my view. Because there are many kami, of course. There is only one absolute God, but there are many saints and many things you can worship in Christianity, many things you can worship. Buddha is worshipped, but is not the God. They have many things in Hinduism, many faiths and elements in other faiths as well. But there is also always one absolute. Even in Judaism, they talk about the single Godhead. But there are many angels and deities and divine beings beneath them. So they're all monotheistic ultimately. They're all monotheistic if they speak of the one source. There are many passages of kami and spirit, what you may call deities in between, but doesn't mean they're polytheistic. They all believe in the absolute, so they are monotheistic. Every single faith is both, in actual fact. Kami are classified in three ways. So these are the spirits. Because there are many kami. In the Norito, kami are classified in three ways. The Amatsu kami, which are heavenly kami. The Kunitsu kami, which are earthly kami. And Yarusa, right? Yoruzu kami, sorry about this. There are a myriad of other sub-kamis, many representations of nature kamis. Kami are therefore not necessarily deities in the sense that that is usually understood. They are not deities. They're expressions, representations of elements of nature, but possess a wide variety of spiritual powers and attributes. Shinto can be described as polytheistic in the concept of Amatsukimi, which is the heavenly kami, and closer to the idea of gods. Well, if you could call them divine beings, but there is a Godhead. That all of Shinto kami are both many and one, both individual entities and parts of a whole. So this is the central kami. Polytheism is far from a full definition of Shinto. It's partially descriptive, as I've mentioned before. What is Shinto? So it does not matter how one believes in and chooses to describe the divine power or powers, as long as that belief is not used to justify destructive ambitions or to do evil to others. Shinto neither excludes mystical abilities nor praises them excessively. Buddhism interprets this worldly existence as suffering, which I disagree with. It's not suffering. Has a strong tendency to seek salvation in the other world. Shinto, at its core, a life-affirming faith, living in the world as a positive experience, but is not regarded as the only reality, and never should the presence and power of an unseen world be denied. In this age, when human beings are destroying Mother Earth in the pursuit of material progression, we should reclaim our love for nature. Shinto's simple belief that anybody can accept neither requires special intellectual ability, nor does it demand a life-denying asceticism, which I don't believe any passage to the divine requires life-denying asceticism. Understand the attributes associated with cleanness and brightness, which is happiness, rightness and straightness, which is honesty. Yamakage Shinto was handed down through the Yamakage family. Shinto has evolved and radically altered through the ages. The Shinto begins in the era before Buddhism, arrived in Japan. Shugo Shinto was born. Shugo literally means learned and integrated Shinto. Interaction and overlap between Shinto and Buddhism. The Yoshida Shinto integrated the way of yin and yang inherited from the Taoist influences. Later, Shirakawa Shinto, the great shrine, and Great Shrine Family Shinto, or Shake Shinto, developed. This line was traditionally handed down to the priest family of a great shrine, the Taisha, such as the shrines of Ise, Kamo, Isumo, Usa, and Munaka. National shrine evolved after the Meiji Restoration period. So there these national shrines came through, you can visit. And finally, when we exclude Shinto traditions, Buddhist influences, modern era Shinto, from all these lines mentioned, what remains is so-called Koshinto, the original one, handed down to a few families. In Koshinto, the systematic methods of exercise and training are important. There are several lines of Koshinto, of which only a very few are orthodox. Okay, so that takes us a very long way through what is Shinto. It describes, from the author's words, the history of Shinto, some basic principles of Shinto, what it is. He's not talking about what's the practices of Shinto just yet, because we're going to go through those. But it's giving you a good background to the nature of it. Quite long there, but it's useful. But remember, see only grace before you. That is the passage. See only grace before you. The second coming is you. It always will be you. The body, the spirit, the soul must unite. So the soul, the heart, the mind, and the body, and the body being the vessel and the shaft, unite into the reflection of the spirit, which is always on the right. Move the soul to the spirit, from the left to the right, into the narrow channel which this text has already referred to. And make it transformative, not just notional or for virtuous practice, because it really doesn't have any power to it. Make it within yourself and speak to the Father every day in prayer and in silence and in meditation, even in discourse as you walk through the passages of timelessness on this earth. Speak to the divine Father, speak to the all itself. It hears. Speak to it as it is with you. Speak to the divine and the beings that surround you, that the Father sends for you. Speak to them. They are always there. Make it transformative, because that is where the change happens. Okay, I want to say thank you. I'll just put the webcam back on there. I'll say thank you again for listening to this. I truly appreciate your time. Hope it's been useful. It's going to be an interesting journey through Shinto. It's different. You're going to find it slightly different, but very much the same still to all of the other faiths that we've passing through. We're going to go through this pretty quickly. All the videos have been prepared. We're going to go through over the next few days all of Shinto, and then we're going to jump onto the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I am looking forward to reading. So enjoy Shinto and the journey together. I thank you, and God bless you all, and thank you again for being with me on this journey. God bless. Thank you.